Hello, hello. Welcome to my safe space. My name is Lena. Here I talk about my childhood traumas and how they affected me in my adulthood. I have experienced child sexual abuse, abandonment, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. If you would like to know my story, you can watch my first video here. In today's deep dive, I want to discuss my abandonment issues and how abandonment affected me in my life in general. My CSA trauma was more obvious to me. I knew it was something I would have to address at some point in life. But in the case of my abandonment trauma, I didn't know right away that it hurt me as much as it did. According to Psychology Today's article written by late Peg Streep, maternal abandonment evokes a flood of emotions, some contradictory, mixed in with pain and longing. There is often rage and anger along with guilt and shame. Thankfully, the numbers of children that grow up without a mom are relatively low. 4.5% of children in America live without their moms for various reasons that include death of a mother as well as walking out. I tried finding statistics for both Russia and Ukraine, but Russian sources are unreliable and Ukrainian statistics are affected by their ongoing war. So it's hard to tell what the real numbers are, but from what I could find, the number of children raised without a mom in Russia and Ukraine are similar to those of the United States. As for me personally, my parents abandoned me when I was a year and a half old. My dad returned when I was 9, but my mom never returned. To make this traumatic event even worse, my grandmother intentionally or unintentionally said to me frequently that I was abandoned by my parents, then just by my mother when my dad returned, and that I wasn't loved by anybody and no one cared about me. The worst part is that it was all true. As a very little child, I was laughed at by kids and adults for calling my grandmother mom. Various adults would always tell me how lucky I was my grandmother took me in and that I should worship her for that, which only solidified what my grandma told me already. No one wanted me. And the person that did only took me because she had to, because I was her granddaughter. It is common for our culture to have grandparents help raise their grandchildren, so it wasn't unheard of. The only difference was that my parents lived 5,500 kilometers away, which is the same distance as is between Anchorage, Alaska, and Miami, Florida. Different strangers and friends of my grandparents would openly criticize my mom and tell me to my face what a mom she was. The only person that never said anything negative about my mom was my grandpa. And I don't even remember him agreeing with my grandma or talking shit about my mom with her. I looked up to my grandpa, and because he didn't take my grandma seriously, I didn't take her seriously either. I didn't worship her like I was suggested, and I didn't hate my mom, which is what my grandma wanted all along. Sometimes I would talk back and defend my mom. When I was 13, I wanted to run away and take a train to Yakutia and find my mom. I was sure she wanted to be with me, but couldn't because the evil grandmother wouldn't let her. It was obviously just my imagination. In reality, my grandma wasn't lying. She was telling how it is, which was cruel, but at least it was true. So I gotta give her that. I would rather be hurt than delusional and at the end get hurt even more. When I went to kindergarten and when I went to school, I was the only person raised by grandparents and who didn't have a mom. Some kids didn't have a dad present in their lives, but everyone had a mom and usually a grandmother too, the mom's mom. I always felt like an outcast because of that. One time we were in school and someone came in to tell my classmate that her mom died. They told her outside of the classroom and she came back crying and we all gathered to console her. I will never forget that. After that, I briefly felt like I had someone I could relate to, but it still wasn't the case. Her mom loved her and would have been around had she not died. My mom, on the other hand, was alive and chose not to be with me. I quickly realized we were not the same. I was low-key envious of other kids when they talked about their mom. I couldn't even say the word. It was so hard for me to say it out loud when we were reading a book in the class and the word was in the book. I always had the word stuck in my throat. I don't have this problem now, but I used to have it until I met my mother again when I was 15 years old. I had to learn how to say it, and she was a stranger to me. But hearing my brother call her mom helped me a little bit. I thought about my mom a lot, seemingly all the time. I would constantly flip through old photos of her and me when I was 5 or when I was a baby. Those were the only times I had her. Looking at those photos gave me this warm feeling, a sense of her presence. I would also look at her letters she wrote to my grandmother in the beginning. I would smell them, touch them, kiss them. I would find her clothes in my dad's house and I would put them on for a few minutes. Then I would put them back and pretend I never touched them. I thought she was going to be back one day and would want them to look in the same condition she left them. I don't think I showed very many mental health issues associated with early maternal abandonment when I was still a kid. I had healthy relationships with kids my age. I didn't have trust issues, didn't have anxiety or anger issues. I think I was a pretty normal kid. I was a leader amongst kids, especially outside of school when not watched by an adult. I was always known to be funny, physically active. I always had A's and B's. In Ukraine's, it was 5s and 4s. Even when I sabotaged school, I still had good grades. And then I had my mom much closer when we moved to Yakutia, and I lived there ages 15 to 18. Technically, I could call her at any time, but never did, not even once. She felt like a stranger, and why would I be calling a stranger? Then she gave birth to her last daughter, and I visited her at the hospital because she invited me. That was weird as hell. No one else was there, and I didn't get to see the baby. In Russia, they don't let you see a newborn for a while because they're in quarantine. So it was like super awkward to talk to her. And I stayed with her family in the summer a couple of times, her husband and kids. But I mostly hung out with my half-brother and got in trouble with him just like we did when we were kids. My mom would also leave her newborn for us to watch. And we were both teenagers, 15 and 17. My brother knew way more about babies than I did. He watched his other little sister since she was born and was 5 at the time. That is my mom's third child. And now this little baby was in a way of him doing his own teenage boy stuff. The last thing he wanted to do was to change diapers. He would call mom out and tell her he's not raising another baby and that she's a mother. I was speechless. I never thought she loved him more because she didn't abandon him. But now I realize that it probably was true that she didn't have a choice but to keep him, and otherwise she would have abandoned him as well. I know nothing about my brother's childhood, and I wished asked him while he was still alive. A mother leaving is life-altering for a child. The abandonment trauma came crushing me in my late 20s. That's when I had it the worst. For 10 years, up until 2 years ago, I was so hyper-vigilant, it's insane. I had times when I knew I had this issue and worked on bettering myself, but most of the time, hypervigilance consumed me. That is hands down the biggest effect I have on my mental health. I always assumed people would abandon me, betray, hurt, or deceive me. I would always read too much into interactions and assume hidden meanings. I would check people's expressions, their body language, or their tone for signs of disapproval and rejection. I was informally diagnosed with GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, by a psychiatrist. I had it really bad in 2020, 2022. I was constantly worried about everything: work, friendship, marriage, etc. I couldn't turn off my thoughts when going to bed, and I would have multiple thoughts running at once, not being able to focus on any one thought. It got so bad, I wanted to scream, but because my husband was sleeping next to me, I would just get up, go to another room, and shake my body to relieve built-up tension. This is when I started taking sleeping pills because falling asleep would take me hours and hours due to restlessness and rumination. At some point, I was prescribed trazodone, but I showed severe side effects immediately, so I had to stop taking it. So you can say I was never on antidepressants or any other medication to treat my problems. I was very irritable. The smallest thing could make me angry. I would overreact over minor stressors, especially while driving or when something fell out of my hand or just something didn't cooperate with me. I could just break down over the stupidest thing out of frustration. In this moment, I felt like even the smallest things hated me. I felt like nothing worked for me, and I was falling at the smallest, stupidest things, like I was useless and dumb. I would analyze past conversations and my actions, worrying about being rejected. I can't really say I ever cared about what people thought about me. In fact, I would sabotage this very idea, and I would dress weird or say mean things on purpose. I would be rude and obnoxious, all to make sure that if they rejected me, it would be for a reason I could easily explain. So it's never a surprise. If someone didn't want to hang out with me, I would know it was because I called them stupid or something. I didn't want to be rejected and not know why. So I made up a reason for this why. Not caring what people think about me is something I still do and don't plan to change. I don't actively create reasons for people to dislike me anymore, but I'm also not being a people's pleaser. Never been and never will be. I think there needs to be a balance between the two. Hopefully I found it and practice it, but I can't fully be the judge of that. I think it requires an outside opinion. Abandoned child syndrome really affected my work life. I am my worst in a work setting. I've been working as a server or a bartender for the last 10 years. I currently work from home, or at least I'm trying to, but before I quit, I became my worst enemy. I would always think my coworkers were out to get me and that they can't be trusted and that they probably have their little groups where they probably talk about me. I would almost never go out with my coworkers, maybe like once a year, if that, because I feared rejection. What's funny and interesting is that I always made lifelong friends at every workplace I've worked at. Even though I would be a nightmare at work, I would be a good friend outside of work. And some people could see that, and we befriended each other. I've also made a big step forward last year by befriending one of my managers. We are now friends outside of work, despite being polar opposite in every regard. But I used to be afraid of being rejected by my manager the most. And as you can guess, it wasn't out of fear to be fired as an employee. I was always afraid of being rejected by them as a person. So I would just sabotage myself and make sure that my manager hated me. And if they didn't, I would convince myself that they do, but they're hiding it well. It was exhausting, but it's in the past now, not so distant, but still. I don't think I have PTSD from being abandoned. I was too little to remember anything and was assuming my grandmother as my mom for a very long time. I think it helped me a lot, even though it wasn't intentional. But I never had flashbacks with my mom in them. I never even dreamed about her, and I would probably wake up in cold sweat if I saw her in one of my dreams. That's why I don't think I have PTSD or CPTSD from abandonment itself. There wasn't a moment I can remember when my mom was waving me goodbye and I was hysterically crying and reaching for her. When I was younger, I was clingy in relationships with men, but later I would sabotage my relationships so that I wasn't the one rejected. I would try my best to initiate the breakup and succeed most times, either by literally breaking up with the guy or by being a bitch to repel him and as a result him dumping me. But in that case, at least I would have an explanation why he dumped me because I basically asked for it. One thing I never had is separation anxiety. You would think being abandoned by your mother would cause you to always expect to never see a person again, and separation with them would be stressful. It has never been the case for me. I handle goodbyes exceptionally well. When I left home to go to Ukraine for 2 weeks, I never felt anxious about being apart from my husband or my dog. I know they're going to be okay, I'm going to be okay, and we will reunite at the end of this trip. If my husband goes for a TDY, I don't worry about him not coming back for whatever reason. I know he will be back when he said he was going to be. I also always had and still have a strong desire to protect those that can't fend for themselves. I feel like it has to do with the fact that I didn't have a mother to protect me when I thought she was the only person who could. If I believe there was some kind of injustice made, a person was unfairly treated at work, or a child was screamed at, or anything of that sort, I would insert myself in those situations and fight for justice for them. I've done it even when someone I didn't like was treated unfairly. I don't care who you are. If someone is being mean to you for no reason, we're gonna have a talk. As a teenager, I believed in revenge. I thought revenge should be served every single time someone wronged me. I took pride in it too. I would hold grudges and look for an opportunity to strike later. For example, some girl is mean to me in class, I'll remember it, and when she's expecting it the least, I'm gonna be mean to her. That kind of stuff. As I got a bit older, in my early 20s, I realized it was exhausting and I didn't care for it, and I just stopped caring. If someone wronged me, I would just respond right then and there and move on. I don't hold grudges anymore, except from my family. Anyway, this is a long list of negative effects of abandonment on my mental health and my personality as a whole, but I changed a lot in the past 10 years due to maturity and my 5-step healing process. You can watch a video I made about it right here. Maybe I will talk about my positive traits next time. After all, I'm not a bad person. If you like my deep dives, don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified when I post a new video, usually every Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.